Well, good evening, everyone. My name's Erin. I'm a clinical dietitian and diabetes educator here at Stanford. And thank you for attending our Diabetes Care Program Wellness Group this evening. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing Jillian Ringrose. Jillian's a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist. She's been with Stanford Health Care for nearly 3 years and has been working with the diabetes population for over 12 years. Jillian works closely with people living with type 1 and type 2 diabetes. And having type 1 diabetes herself, she loves helping others and working with them to find ways to do things they love while continuing to manage their condition. We have a sweet treat tonight. Jillian's going to talk about carb-friendly dessert options to enjoy during the holiday season. If you have questions, go ahead and add them into the Q&A section. It's located at the bottom of your screen. Jillian will answer questions throughout. And this webinar will be recorded and posted along with all of tonight's recipes. And you can find it on the Stanford Health Library under the Diabetes Care Program. And I'll go ahead and put the link to that website in the chat. So I'll go ahead and hand it over to Jillian.
Awesome. Thank you, Erin, for the introduction. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I'm excited to share with you some carb-friendly options that you can maybe try during the holidays. This is a fun time of year for many of us. We're spending a lot of time with our family, our friends, baking with our kids. We're going to holiday parties, just kind of enjoying foods that we're not necessarily eating throughout the year. So obviously really fun, very exciting time of year, but definitely for someone who has diabetes, it could be a little bit more challenging. And so by that, we're eating different foods that tend to be higher in carbs, have a lot more added sugar. So it can make managing blood sugars a little bit trickier. So one of the things that I have found is that I always like to play with different recipes throughout the year and find a few that kind of like work and maybe a little bit more carb friendly that I know will be easier to manage my blood sugars. So I've got 4 recipes that I'm going to share with you today. The first one I'm going to talk to you about is called an almond flour cookie. This is one of my favorites. Erin will show that recipe shortly. But this is one of my favorites. I've been making this recipe probably for 7, 8 years when I came across it. What I love about it is it's not only really easy to make, I think there's just less ingredients than maybe a traditional cookie, but it's also more blood sugar friendly, I have found personally. Why it could be a little bit more friendly for blood sugars. One of the big reasons is it's made from almond flour. So almond flour has a lot less carbs in it than a traditional wheat flour. So that's definitely going to cut down on your total carb count. The other thing that I love about this recipe is it doesn't have a lot of added sugar. So if you see on the slide deck, it's only got 3 tablespoons of pure maple syrup, which is not a lot when you look at other recipes, and they're easily calling for half a cup to a cup, maybe even more of, brown sugar and, regular sugar or other added sweeteners. So the combination of the almond flour, less of the added sugars really helps kind of keep that total carb count, content down. And so I'm going to kind of do a demonstration for you, kind of how you would make it, and I'll obviously show you the final product. So in here, I've kind of already separated for the recipes I'm going to demonstrate for you my wet and dry ingredients just to kind of make it easier. So in my dry ingredients, I've got obviously the almond flour, the salt, and the baking soda. And so again, you just mix that together, and then you've got your wet ingredients here, your egg, your vanilla, and the maple syrup, of course. So I'm just gonna mix it in really quick. So again, just like you would, I would say, a traditional cookie, you're just gonna mix all of that ingredients. I'll kind of show you here until it's mixed really well. I think definitely the almond flour, when you're cooking with that, you may find that you need to kind of mix it a little bit more till it all sticks. But rest reassured, it'll mix together really nicely. So you can kind of see this is what it's looking like when you've got that dough mix. So the final step you're going to do is going to mix chocolate chips. This recipe calls for a half a cup of mini chocolate chips. Obviously, you can, do a larger chocolate chip if you want. I have personally found that the mini chocolate chips work really well. Kind of like, I feel like gives you more chocolate in each cookie. I have a 5-year-old and she's all about, her chocolate. So she, of course, loves when there's tons of mini chocolate chips in there. So again, you're just gonna pour these in and you're just gonna mix it. And spend some time, I would say, mixing the chocolate chips just because you want to make sure that, it's mixed well and you're not getting like a lump of the chocolate chips that's, got a ton or a lump of the cookie dough that there's, not much in. And so literally all you'll do, just like a cookie, kind of just gonna take this amount, we're gonna just roll it up into a ball. So something of like, that, maybe probably a little bit bigger than what I'm showing you. And so then you're just going to put it on your cookie sheet and you're going to cook it in the oven for about 8 to 10 minutes. Cook it to your liking. I'm one that I like a softer cookie, so I tend to do it more at the 8-minute mark versus if you like it a little bit crunchier or harder, you may want to do it on the higher mark. So those are things to keep in mind. So as you can see, I've kind of done a little plate here. Don't want it to fall, but that's what it looks like. So one recipe is going to make 16 cookies. So a little bit less than like maybe a traditional cookie, but it's still a good amount. And each cookie has only 9 grams of carbohydrates in it. So again, a lot more carb friendly than, maybe a traditional cookie that could easily have 25, 30 plus grams. So it's one of my favorites. I love it. I think, if you're making this for a family gathering or going somewhere, you may find you want to do like a double batch just again, because it is a little bit smaller amount of recipe, but definitely an easy go-to for that one.
Jillian, those were picture perfect that you showed us on the platter. We do have a question. If someone
Yeah.
is allergic to almonds, do you have a recommendation for a substitution for the flour?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. For this particular recipe, I don't, but I think it's always good, playing around with maybe like an oat flour if you like that. Um, and so, or looking for different recipes that have different flours that maybe you like to use. I think it's all about trial or just trying different recipes, to be honest. Again, what may work for me and my blood sugars may not work for someone else. So like, just trying out different recipes too to see one if it tastes good. That's obviously a key factor. But also like how does it work for your blood sugars? Any other questions?
Great. Thank you. I know there's so many flour options available these days. It can be a little overwhelming, but yeah,
Yeah,
lots of
yeah.
options to choose from.
Yeah, and I think, looking at the nutrition labels could be helpful. How many total carbs in it? Does it have any added protein, fats, from like example, the almond flour has got, a good amount of fat from the almonds, obviously. So you can look at that, I think, when you're looking at different flour options. All righty. Any other questions for the almond flour cookie?
Yeah, no,
Okay. All
just
right.
thought
So
they look
on
delicious. People are ready to try them out.
like I said, they're one of my favorites. I just love them because they're easy. So the next recipe I'm going to share with you all today or talk about is an apple crisp recipe. Excuse me. It's that time of year. Pies are so popular, between Thanksgiving, Christmas, and all the in-betweens. You've got your apple pie, your pumpkin pie, pecan pies, and everything else. So they're popular, and I love myself, my piece of apple pie on Thanksgiving. But I love crisps because I feel like they are a little bit more carb friendly of an option. And they can kind of help, they may help with blood sugars and, making them a little bit more predictable if you take insulin, dosing for insulin as well. So why is this like a little bit more of a carb friendly option? So it doesn't have the pie crust. So obviously cutting down on your pie crust is definitely going to cut out a lot of carbohydrates. And kind of the topping for it, it doesn't have as much, again, this recipe doesn't call for as much added sugars in it. So it only calls for about like around a quarter of a cup of brown sugar. So a lot less because again, a traditional apple pie could easily have half a cup or more of added sugar, again, depending on the recipe that you're following. So I think the combination of that really helps cut down on the carb content. I love this recipe too because a lot of crisps will have oats included, and oats are just great for us. They help with digestion. You get a little bit extra fiber too as you're enjoying this little sweet treat. So I've got my apples and my kind of top mix for you. So it calls for 5 cups of apples. So basically that's about, I would say like 5, apples, if they're kind of like a medium size. If you're using a large or extra large apple, you may only need 2 to 3, to be honest. So you can estimate, or you can pull up the measuring cup and get that visual of how much you need. What you want to do is you're going to slice your apples. So you're going to de-skin them and slice the apples. So I have one of these. I love these kind of apple core peelers. I think they're really easy. Makes my apple slicing really easy. I don't have to peel anything and kind of just evenly cut them up. If you don't have one of those, it's okay. Just de-skin it and then cut the apples accordingly. So it doesn't have to be perfect. Again, you can kind of just see I have like a nice little bowl of apples here. So now with the apples, I'm going to kind of put in like the mixture kind of, to add a little bit extra sweetness to those apples. So that's going to be, a little bit of sugar, a little bit of the flour, and then some of the spices. It also calls for some lemon juice, which I've already added. Again, that just kind of helps, the apples from, browning too much. So one thing with this recipe, the original recipe calls for apple pie spice. That one is tough for me to find around here, so I tend to use more of like cinnamon and a little bit of nutmeg. And so again, you can play around with the amount. You can even do like a pumpkin pie spice if you prefer, or just keep it at cinnamon. So you again can play around with those. In all my recipes, I've included kind of the original recipe where I've gotten these recipes, and then in the PowerPoint presentation, and you'll receive both. It'll kind of include some of my tweaks, I guess, that I've made to the recipes. So again, I'm just going to mix, all of this part of the ingredient together. You're just going to mix it in. Again, I think the big thing is you just want to mix it well. So, all of that kind of like, sugary, sweet, flavorful mixture kind of gets on all of the apples. So you're not getting, one that's maybe not as flavorful. One thing I did forget to mention, and this may or may not be a question, but is what kind of apple should we be using? Again, I think it's preference. I've used kind of a mix here tonight of like a Gala apple, and I've also used a green, like Granny Smith type apple. So the Granny Smiths are a little bit tardier. So if you're one that likes a kind of a tardier flavor, I would go with something like that. If you like, more of a sweeter apple, choose one of the sweeter apples, like Honeycrisp apple, for, example, or again, Skull apples can be sweeter. And again, there's so many other apples out there that I know I'm not mentioning. So again, you could play around with this. So again, now that I've got the apples mixed up, you're just going to put this in like a baking size dish. So I kind of use this and then I just dump them in here. The next part of the recipe is that topping goodness. So this is the oats. This is again more of the spices, a little bit more of the brown sugar, and a little bit of butter. It calls for 4 tablespoons of butter. So you're gonna like mix the topping up until it's kind of like crumbly. I think what helps this part is, kind of keeping your the butter like at a room temperature. So that way it helps kind of you create that like, coarseness for it. And so that way you're kind of getting all of that nice kind of bubbliness as it's cooking in the oven. You're not missing any areas that kind of like dry it out. So that would be my recommendation for that. So again, you just will pour these in a dish. I've kind of prepared one just so I can show you all. So again, it looks like this. It's kind of a little bit nicer presentation. I've kind of cut one out. So again, you can see here you've got the nice, crispiness and the crunchiness from the topping, and then you've got like the cooked apples. This can be served warm or room temperature. It really is your preference. I know for me, like I like it warm, so I'll even heat it up if I've, like made this yesterday. I'll heat it up tomorrow. A half a cup is about 25 grams of carbs. So again, it still has carbohydrates in it. But if you compare that to a traditional pie, which can easily be 50 plus grams of carbs, it's a lot less. So again, it'll still mindful of portion sizes, still taking, if you take diabetes medication, before a meal, like insulin, still important to give your insulin for it, but a nice kind of option that, may be a little bit better for the blood sugars as well. And super tasty. I really like crisps. They're definitely my favorite. Any questions on the crisp recipe?
Yeah, we do have one question. The photo on the recipe shows ice cream, and somebody's wondering if you have ice cream recommendations to
Yeah.
go along with this.
So it's been a while since, I go through kind of periods of like if I'm craving ice cream or not. For me, Halo ice cream, that comes to top of my mind, that I'll buy because it's a little bit lower carb option. It's like a dairy-free type of ice cream. There are so many more options that you can buy, to be honest. So you can find one that, yeah, maybe like a little bit of a dairy-free option. Usually these types of ice cream still have a decent amount of protein, which is nice because again, as you always hear us talk about, is like pairing protein with carbs, just to kind of help with the blood sugars. So yeah, there are definitely some lower carb ice cream options you can choose from.
All right, thanks, Jillian.
Cool. All right. So the next recipe I'm going to share with you is a chocolate like nut bake. I really like this recipe because I made this over the holidays actually for my family for Thanksgiving. Was a huge hit. I think some of the things I really love about this recipe is it's super easy. As you can see, it only has two ingredients, chocolate and nuts. And you just mix them together, you put it in the fridge, and it's done after 20 minutes of it hardening. Super easy, but also super tasty. You kind of get that sweetness from the chocolate and that savoriness from the nuts. So this recipe, you can use any type of, chocolate chip, semi-sweet, bittersweet milk chocolate, really, it's your choice. My family likes milk chocolate, so I make milk chocolate. If it was up to me, I would probably do the dark chocolate. And same thing with the nuts. You can use an assorted nut mix, or you can, choose a specific nut of your liking, cashews, almonds, hazelnuts, for example. So kind of it's kind of a fun recipe that you can also play around with too. And again, it's really easy. You just mix everything together. So one thing that the recipe itself doesn't call for, I find that I like it, is kind of like putting the nuts that I'm using in the bag and just kind of, pounding on them so they kind of are smaller pieces throughout the nut bark. So again, it's your choice. You don't have to do that. Those are some kind of just tips and tricks that, I've played around with this recipe. And again, when you're putting it in, I use kind of a size like this. let Erin switch over. There you go. So I use this about a pan like this. And again, it looks like that. So again, if you want to be super fancy, you can even, drizzle some, of that crushed up nuts on it to make it a little bit fancier. Obviously, if I was serving this, I would put it on a different serving dish, but I just wanted to give you like that visual of like what it looks like. Okay. So it's nice, I have a small piece right here. You get a little bit better of a piece. So you can kind of see the nuts are nice and in there. Whoops, my webcam. And then the top. So again, kind of a really nice sweet and savory taste. So with this recipe, when you look, it's one piece is about 7 grams of carbs. So really low in carbs, which is a nice option. One thing that I will say about this is sometimes when we're cutting up, we may not cut up like 36 pieces, maybe only cut up like 30 pieces, for example. And so, just keep that in mind, maybe a few more grams of carbs when you're eating that piece, if it's not cut up exactly. But again, really fun recipe to kind of bring out to parties, have people over and eat, and it's super easy, which I really like. Any questions on that? Okay. So
those are so picture perfect. I was actually thinking that could also make a great gift too.
It could, yeah. And I think too, one thing that I did at Thanksgiving that I forgot to mention is like if you're not needing to be specific, for carb counting, and again, if you're making it for someone, I think what's really fun is just kind of like ripping it up, to be honest. And then you've kind of got those cute, like little, mismatch pieces that you can put in a bag. So that's another kind of, I guess, a little trick you can play around with if you're, gifting it to someone too. All right. So the last recipe I'm going to show you, it's not so much like you're going to take it anywhere, but I think it's nice like to have at home, maybe when you're with your family or, you're watching, TV or a movie at night, you're kind of like maybe craving a little something sweet. I know for my family, hot chocolate is very popular between my husband and my oldest. Like if I let my daughter have hot chocolate every day, she would be a happy camper. And so I'm always looking for ways, okay, like what are some ways that I don't have to use those added packets, which we all know have a lot of added sugars in them, and can be a little bit more carb friendly, not only, for myself, but even, even my family. So this is a recipe that I came across a few years ago when, I was kind of craving some hot chocolate, but wanted to find something a little bit more carb friendly. So it calls for a cup of milk. You can use whatever milk of your choice. Tonight I have almond milk, and so I'm going to use that in unsweetened almond milk. But if you're trying to, you're having it by itself, or you're wanting to try and add some protein, then a cow's milk may be a good option, or different. Fairlife, for example, is another kind of dairy-free option that's got a good amount of protein. So you have that. You can either put this in your saucepan or put it in your microwave. And so in my cup here, I've got some milk. And then I'm going to add a little teaspoon of pure vanilla extract, or quarter teaspoon, excuse me. And then I'm also going to add a tablespoon of cocoa powder. Grab that. And then the last thing I'm going to add, it's like, what's the sweetener, is some pure maple syrup. So again, that's about a tablespoon of that as well. If you prefer to use like a sugar-free syrup, that's definitely something that you can do if you'd like. So again, that's another way to, cut down on a little bit of the carb count as well. So I'm just going to mix this all together until it's mixed really well. And then I would put it, in the microwave tonight. Or again, if I'm making it on the stove, I would let that warm up till it gets, nice and hot to temperature. And then it's ready to drink. What I do like to add to my recipe, and I know like my daughter, my husband love it, is a little whipped cream. Whipped cream is actually pretty low in carbs, so if you add a little spurt of it, kind of like makes it a little bit fancier, kind of like that specialness I think that we all enjoy from having some hot chocolate. So another, easy recipe, again, kind of a fun one to have, maybe on a weeknight or, when you're doing something with your family and you want to have, that little sweet treat. Any questions on that? All
No,
right.
but people are getting hungry and commenting
Right.
just on how delicious everything is. And yeah, I just love how you're modifying these, kind of standard things that we see, especially around the holidays, and
Yeah.
to enjoy.
Yeah. And I think, the last thing that I always kind of like to remind people is like, the holidays are such a fun time of year. Like we want to be able to enjoy them with our families and our friends. Like, we're not expecting perfection. I always tell people that I work with, there's no perfection with diabetes. And so we're just like aiming, hey, how can we keep our blood sugars in check, majority of the time. But we know that, we're going to have a day here and there where, yeah, we're going to indulge in maybe, something that we don't have all the time. What I remind people too is the holidays are, good 3 months, long if you're starting from like, October with Halloween and stuff. And so what gets people into trouble, I think, is they're eating that consistently. They're eating, those chocolates on a weekly basis, or the pies they're having more often. So again, I think incorporating some recipes like this can be helpful. And again, I think also, making sure you take your medication if you're taking medication to manage your blood sugars, especially if you're doing it any mealtime medication. That could be really helpful too. And again, play around with different recipes too. I'm always love trying different recipes, and finding different substitutions. So, whether you're, substitute oats, like instead of pie crust, like we did tonight, or again, you use an almond flour or a different flour alternative instead of a wheat flour, finding recipe that maybe doesn't have as much added sugars. Those are all great ways to cut down on the carb content, which is always nice. Yeah, so again, I think playing around with it is key, but and again, having fun and enjoying this time of year with family and friends.
It's a great reminder. And we do have some people, sharing their substitutions with the cocoa. Somebody mentioned they love it
Great.
with cashew milk,
Yeah.
another almond milk. Yeah. Um,
Yeah, there's so many alternatives, and again, like test it out. I think what I always tell people that I'm working with that have diabetes is like diabetes is not a one size fits all. So what works for me and my blood sugars may not work for you and others. So see how your body reacts to the different recipes maybe you're wanting to try out, and yeah, see if it one that sticks, awesome. But yeah, it's always fun to play around with different recipes and stuff.
Awesome. We did have one question if you before we go to the wrapping up with the tips and tricks is do you know of or have any recommendations that people can find at the market that might be friendly, diabetes friendly?
Um, so like a lot of well, some stores will have honestly like sugar-free desserts that have already been made. Those tend to be made from like the sugar alternatives or sugar substitutes. So those are an option if that's kind of if you like that. But again, they still have carbohydrates in it, so keep that in mind. And everyone's different. Me personally, like I don't like the taste of like a sugar-free cookie. So I'd rather just make a regular cookie or like the cookie like an almond flour kind of base cookie like I made tonight, and then dose for those types of cookies. But that is an option. As far as ingredients, I think that could get tricky. uh, milk alternatives, like I said, an unsweetened almond milk if you can't have cow's milk. You know, the flours like we used, the almond flour, or like again, doing nuts or the oats. Excuse me, I lost my train of thought with the oats. I think it may be helpful, looking maybe online for recipes. That can kind of maybe be a helpful start to kind of see maybe like what ingredients you could be shopping for too, if that's the route you're wanting to take. There's a lot of great recipes online, a lot of recipes are made from some dietitians who've got, really helpful tips and tricks. If you look at the sources that I provide in my sites, a few of the recipes are made by my dietitian. So that's always nice. But yeah, hopefully, I don't know if that answered your question or not, but hopefully that helped a bit. Um, yeah, and again, the tips or tricks I kind of, mentioned again, substituting, playing around with different recipes, searching for different recipes that have less added sugar in them. Maybe, again, playing using oats instead of pie crust, like I mentioned, and, trying different ingredients. So again, play around with it. I think it's a great time of year to try maybe new recipes that you're interested in, just to see if it's one maybe that'll stick and you'll continue to make every year. And again, taking your medication, I think that's key. Again, if you are one that takes any medicine for your diabetes, definitely making sure that you take that, just so that's going to help. And again, enjoy the holidays. We know we're going to have some days where our blood sugars are going to be higher than we're used to, and again, that's okay. That's why we look at those trends and stuff. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed it. Yeah, are there any other questions?
Let's see here. Yeah, and I love how you just keep bringing it back to how important it is to, well, one, enjoy the holidays, and also just staying on track with your diabetes care plan with your medications and finding room for
Yeah,
those treats that are going to show up.
yeah,
So let's see here. We have lots of people who are very excited to try these out.
awesome.
And let's see if we have any other questions here. Um, some comments on like the resistive flour, using those in recipes. And this person said they haven't tried it out yet, so I think you're inspiring people to experiment. And then there's a question about like, what do you think of stevia sweetener or products using the plant leaves versus the maple syrup?
Yeah, so again, I think they're fine to use, in moderation. Like as I mentioned earlier, like if you go to a grocery store, some of the grocery stores even have like desserts that are made from the stevias or the other different sugar substitutes out there. And again, I think they're fine in moderation. What I have found personally is they have like a different aftertaste when it's in like such large of a sweet to like a cookie or a brownie. But again, everybody has different taste buds. Everybody has different reactions to it. So you don't know until you've tried it. I think, as we all probably know, diabetes is a lot of trial and error. So we don't always know how our body is going to react to something until we've tried it, which I know can be frustrating when you're constantly having to do that. But yeah, if that's something you're interested in, you could try it and see how you react. How it tastes to you as well. And if you like that, then I think it's fine to use in moderation.
Jillian, I'm just going to kind of slowly scroll through the
Yeah,
recipes. So if anybody, because we have somebody who says they are going to a party tomorrow, so I'll give you guys a chance to just kind of screenshot
oh yeah, of course.
these recipes if you'd like. And somebody has how do you compare maple syrup to honey is a question. And then also a question, how many carbs in the hot chocolate?
Oh, thank you for that. I forgot to mention that. So the carbs for the hot chocolate are 18 grams of carbs. And again, that was based on an unsweetened almond milk with regular pure maple syrup. So if you're changing your milk or if you're using a sugar-free syrup, that's going to change the carb content. Um, if you're like, what's the carb content? I will say, look at the nutrition labels. Milk should always have a nutrition label on it. Even if you're using the maple syrup, they're going to all have a nutrition label on it. So that can help you figure out the carb content as well. And the other question, I'm sorry, not sugar-free, maple syrup versus honey. I think they're both fine. And again, it comes to a preference. I'll cook with both, to be honest. I think I tend to veer towards maple syrup only because with my honey, I usually have to kind of warm it up to kind of get it a little bit less sticky, and so it mixes better with my recipes. But I think they're both fine to use in the recipes if you prefer one over the other.
Awesome. Let's see. And yeah, no, everyone's just really appreciative of all of these great recipes to try out and so many helpful tips. So
Awesome. Yeah,
thank you.
well, I hope that you all enjoy some of these recipes. I know my family enjoys them. I will say my daughter, that it's not as sweet of a hot chocolate than a packet, but I think that's kind of to be expected a little bit, but she still enjoys it. But yeah, I hope that you all enjoy some of these recipes. Maybe fun to play around with this time of year as you are gathering with family, friends, co-workers and such. And so yeah, I encourage you play around with it, look, research some different recipes with maybe some, different substitutions that you wouldn't necessarily think of it, and see how it works with your blood sugar, see how it tastes, is it to your liking? And yeah, I hope you all enjoy the holiday season, and I hope you all have a great new year.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jillian, and thank you everyone for attending. Just a reminder, the recording, it will be posted next week at the Health Library under lectures and events at the Diabetes Care Program website. And I did put that link in the chat. And we hope to see all of you next month in the new year, the second Thursday in January at 5 p.m. And it will be led by another one of our dietitians and diabetes educators, Leah Gropo, who will be talking about making healthy changes at the beginning of the new year. So happy holidays.
Thank
And
you, everyone. Thanks for joining us tonight. I hope you all have a good evening and have a great holiday.
happy new year.